I'm going to ask you all to go with me on a journey back to when you were a student in school. Maybe a middle schooler, maybe a high schooler. For some of you, that was just actually a few weeks ago. And for others of you, that was decades ago. I'll be polite and not point out who's who this morning. But we've all had that experience. And do you remember that sinking feeling you had in the pit of your stomach, the dread of returning back to school after the summer break? Do you remember that silent prayer that you uttered as you walked through the doors of the school for the first time that school year, when you said, "God, please don't let everyone remember that embarrassing thing I did last year"? Do you remember getting there on that first day and getting shuffled up in what seems like a pretty random order and placed into these classes, and you go to find desks and you look, you sort of desperately search the room for any signs of a friendly face? Do you remember wondering if you were ever going to measure up to others, whether it be in playing a sport, or playing an instrument, or even being a good student, if you could measure up? Do you remember looking at the clock, just wondering, when will this day end so I can start again? Now those feelings are feelings I think we've all had as we started back to school, but do those feelings ever actually end in our lives? We might be in different situations, we might be older, but some of those same insecurities, some of those same human needs crop back up in our day-to-day, no matter how old we are. In today's gospel, John tells this story about Jesus, where Jesus is in the temple courtyard, the area right outside the temple. And some Pharisees, these judgmental, these self-righteous Pharisees, bring a woman to Jesus whom they have caught in adultery. It doesn't say much more about her crime than that. But the reason they bring her to Jesus is for Jesus to pronounce judgment upon her. And Jesus does something. Jesus always does this. He always surprises us with his reactions. Instead of pronouncing judgment, he bends down and he takes his finger and he starts writing on the ground. The woman who's standing there, she's especially curious about what Jesus might be writing there on the ground. She's pretty sure whatever it is applies to her. It is her judgment that he's supposed to be pronouncing after all. And the Pharisees keep questioning him until he stands back up. He straightens back up, and the woman looks down at those words. And the words read, "You will never be anything. You will never be anything." And the woman is offended, but she's not visibly upset. She's had people tell her she'll never be anything her entire life, especially religious leaders pronouncing judgment on her. Life has been cruel to her the same way life can be cruel to all of us. We've all experienced. But she's had a particularly rough life. You will never be anything is not a surprise to her. But what is a surprise to her is that Jesus looks at the Pharisees and the elders, and he says, "Okay, if this woman must be dealt with, the one of you who is without sin, you throw the first stone." Jesus stands up for her and defends her. And then he bends back down and continues writing. Number one on the sermon note sheets. Looking for the faults of others blinds us to our own issues. Looking for the faults of others blinds us to our own issues. Having two teenage sons is a great refreshment for me of what it was like to be in school. I remember the days of being shamed and bullied at school, like most children are at some point. And I was talking to one of my sons not too long ago, and they were sharing with me this really hurtful, this really mean thing that a student had said to another student. And I asked my son, I said, so why do you think that this student would say something so mean to another student? And my son responds to me, he said, well, Dad, because they feel bad about themselves that they would say something like that. That's wisdom. That he was able to recognize that when you look at the faults of others, you're really covering up something that's going on inside of yourself. Now, I wish that cruelty and bullying and just treating people poorly stopped at school, but we know that after you graduate, that does not stop. In fact, the next day after that conversation with my son, I went into work, and I was sitting in my office here at the church, and a parishioner came in tears about being bullied by an adult. And then just this week, I had a conversation with a member here in the church who said, I'm struggling making connections here at Mount Olive. I love this church, but I can't. I'm not having an easy time making friends. Now, I'm not beating up on this church. I think that's the case at all churches. But we should change that. We can change that if we just see one another the way Jesus sees us. Number 2 on the sermon notes. Jesus sees us not just for who we have been, but also who we can be. Jesus sees us not just for who we have been, but also who we can be. We're talking about our potential, our hidden, untapped potential. And I'm not talking about some undiscovered, amazing gift, like if we would just start practicing piano, we might be some kind of virtuoso. I don't mean that. I mean our untapped potential for love. Our untapped potential for spreading joy in the world. I want to tell you about a good friend of mine, Nate. In fact, Nate's one of my best friends. I love Nate. He is a wonderful guy, and I just love being around him. I should mention, though, Nate has no idea who I am. He doesn't know my name. And now, that's okay, because he calls me by something that I think is even better than my name. He calls me young man. Every time that I talk to him, he calls me young man. I'll take that over Ryan any day. Now, I know Nate's name because it's on his name tag. Nate works at the gas station close to my house. And Nate has tapped into his potential working at that gas station. If you go in there for 2 minutes to pay for your gas and to get your morning cup of coffee, and you are exposed to Nate's complimentary nicknames, his infectious smile, his contagious laughter, he's going to make you feel better about yourself and the day you're getting ready to face. He's tapped into that potential. Can you imagine that? The impact that we have, that in 2 minutes in a gas station, somebody can change your outlook for your entire day, your self-image. He's tapped into that potential. I'm not kidding when I say this. I would pay Nate to come here on Sunday morning and greet people as they came through. You wouldn't need a sermon. You wouldn't need music, even though music was wonderful today. You wouldn't even need that. Everyone would just show up to be greeted by Nate because he knows the impact of what he says and how he treats people. Now back to Jesus. If you will recall in this story where we left Jesus, Jesus was down, crouched down, still writing in the dirt. He had written, "You will never be anything." But as the scribes, the elders, the Pharisees all clear out, knowing that none of them can claim to be without sin, and the woman is standing there in shock that she's not being stoned to death, she looks down to see what else Jesus has written. And what Jesus wrote was, "You will never be anything less than a beloved child of God. You will never be anything less than a beloved child of God. He stands up, he straightens himself out, and he looks at her and he says, "Go your way and sin no more. I do not condemn you." Number 3, on the sermon notes, Jesus believes we're worthy of his love and reveals to us that others are worthy of ours. Jesus believes we are worthy of his love and reveals to us that others are worthy of ours. Jesus sees us, all of us. And when I say he sees all of us, I mean every single one of us, all of us. But at the same time, I also mean that Jesus sees all of us. He sees the good and the bad and the ugly in each one of us. The stuff that we not only try to hide from those closest to us, we don't just try to hide from those who know us, but we even try to hide it from ourselves. Jesus sees all of that. Jesus sees how very ugly we all can be, every single one of us. And the thing about this, we're in this series about having a fresh start. We don't even need a fresh start for Jesus to love us. We don't even need a clean slate for Jesus to love us. Jesus sees us for who we are, at our very ugliest. And yet, Jesus still loves us more than anyone else in the world. Jesus still values us and sees us as worthy more than anyone else in the world, even those who love us so much. We don't even need a fresh start. But we live in a world where people don't know the love of Jesus. The people around us, those in our community, those in our neighborhoods, maybe even those in our own home, don't know that Jesus has that kind of love for them. Today is God's Work Our Hands Sunday. And so because it is that day, we remember that the work that we do, the love that we show, is actually God's love through us. People will not know God's love the way that we know God's love unless we are the ones to show it to them. Unless we show people that they are worthy, that they are nothing less than beloved children of God. Unless we do that, they won't know the love that we are given, that we experience each and every day. We don't need a fresh start, but we are God's. It's God's work, our hands, to show people that they have a fresh start.